In Sefer Bereshit, we're told of two reasons for marriage, two mitzvot that can only be completed within marriage. And the one is probably the most obvious one, and that's pruruvu, which means to be fruitful and multiply. And that's a mitzvah that is on the man, that he must have a certain amount of children. And you can speak to your local rabbinic authority to find out exactly how many you need to have. But I want to focus on the other mitzvah because it's just as important as having children. And it's one of the reasons why we do get married. If we look in the second chapter of Sefer Bereshit, we'll find something very interesting. And this is something that isn't really told so often, but is of utmost importance to young married people, old married people, people getting married, people thinking about getting married. And that is to know what being married is. We are told that Hashem sees that it's not good for Adam to be alone. Lo tov hiyot Adam levado, e'aseh lo ezek negdo. I'm going to make him a helpmate against him, for him. That's for another time. And then we find something very interesting. Adam is now told, go and name all of the animals. Go through the animal kingdom, find the elephants and name them, and name the lions and name the birds, and give everything a name. We're told that he had a certain Ruach HaKodesh, that he could see the essence of the thing, and then he would come out with its name. And in so doing, he realized that each one had its pair, each one had its mate. And that experience for Adam, if we try to think about it, that is an experience of loneliness. So when Hashem says, Lo tov hiyot Adam levado, it's not good for man to be alone, we can now see that that alone could mean loneliness, that he feels lonely. He feels that there's something that is missing at the core of his being that is lacking within him. Okay, so that's going to start a stirring towards, I need to find my partner. Where's my person? Who am I meant to walk through life with? Okay, and at this stage, Hashem puts him into a deep slumber, and he takes a bone from his side and he fashions a woman out of this. And when Adam wakes up, we find that he is very excited, because the first thing that he says is Zot hapam, this time we got it right. Zot hapam, etzem ma'atzamai, this is bone of my bone, ubasar mibsari, this is flesh of my flesh. Lezot yikare isha, ki me'ish lukach hazot. This one I'm going to call Isha, ki me'ish lukach hazot, because she was taken from Ish. Now, there are many different ways to kind of understand this. The first time I read it, I was like, oh, this is very chauvinistic. Just because she was taken from man, he calls him woman. She's female just because he's male, female. And, you know, he views her as just an extension of himself. But if I read this a few more times, and believe me, I read it many more times to come to this understanding that what he's seeing here is this time is different, because I recognize that this being has my bones, my flesh. She is me, right? There's an intrinsic knowledge of this person is one. We're meant to be one. And in fact, in the next pasuk, we told it that they have to become one flesh again. So he realizes this. He doesn't realize this intellectually or from, they start to have conversations and he says, wow, this could be a good shidduch. He realizes from his flesh, the knowledge of his flesh, saying, wow, I know this person. There's something familiar here. And what does he call her? He calls her Isha. Ki me'ish lukach hazot, because she was taken from Ish. But this is the first time that we're told that he is an Ish. Okay, so it would make sense that she'd be called Adama because she was taken from Adam. But no, she was taken from Ish, so she was called Isha. And so if we look at it a little bit deeper, what is the word Ish, Isha? It comes from the word Ishiyut, which means your unique personality, the essence of who you are. So when he saw Chava, his wife, he was able to relate to his own personality. He suddenly was able to say, wow, if there's a godly presence in this person, there's a godly presence within me. And in the interactions that they had between each other, that's where they started to discover their own essence and the essence of the person in front of them. So that kind of a connection began through a knowledge of the flesh, that we have something in common, and you recognize that this person is godly, not because we can see a spark of God, there's no halo over our heads or anything like that, but because of the very making of our bodies, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, this person has ishiyut. This person has a spark of God in them. And immediately after this, the next pasuk says, Al kain, therefore, because you've made this realization that this person is not just anybody, but this person has that spark of God, that you have this flesh of my flesh connection with this woman, therefore you must leave your father and mother's home. Al kain ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo, he must literally leave them, but really forsake them. There's a cutting off that needs to occur, from that conscious of kibud av va'em to shalom bayit now comes first, right? No longer I'm the son of, but I am the husband of. We are a unit. We're a new unit. Okay, so there has to be an element of leaving. Al ken ya'azov ish et aviv ve'et imo udavak be'ishto, and he must cleave to his wife. What is this cleaving? Right? In Hebrew, we know that Devic is what we call glue in modern Hebrew. So there's no sticking ourselves together. That's not the purpose. But if we were to say that the one mitzvah of marriage is to fulfill the mitzvah of pururuvu, which is to have children, then the other mitzvah of marriage is Dveikut, which is cleaving to one another. Okay, under the chuppah, we have husband, the bride and the groom, and under the chuppah, their souls are made one. Later on, when they consummate the marriage, mazal tov, they become one body. But then, what's the purpose within marriage? Okay, it is to create a loving relationship, a deep connection, an emotional connection, a psychological connection, and a physical connection where there's longing, this cleaving together like magnets of wanting to be one, right? We know when we're dating, there's that, let me find the one, I want to find the person that I'm going to journey through my life with. And once we're married, it's like, okay, now we're married, let's get on with life. But in essence, there is something that we can continuously be doing in marriage, and that is continuing to get married, more married, and more married, and more married. Because the biblical name for sexual relations is yidiyah, knowledge, right? If you want to become one with someone, well, you've got to know yourself and you've got to know them, right? So this knowledge of another person is something that is deepened throughout your lifetime, right? Each cycle of nidah brings you to another cycle of achdut, of the bodies, of coming together of the bodies, and then of separating, and of figuring out, having some alone time to kind of have some self-development, and then coming together and putting that into that sacred space again. But knowing yourself is one of the most vital elements of being able to know your partner. And I think that's what Adam Arishon was saying here. He says, I see through my partner that I am an ish, that I have my own unique personality given to me by God, and therefore my own mission, and therefore my own worth. And that is expressed through V'hayu levasar echad, they become one flesh. And the one flesh is synonymous with a connection that is body, emotion, spirit, soul. It's not just a body connection. It's a connection of emotions that builds up to a state where you now need to express them physically. And that is the Devic that we must endeavor to be making in our marriages, that whether we're at a time of nida where physical touch is not allowed, or we're at a time where physical touch is permitted, this Devic is something that can continuously be created, because it starts with an emotional and intellectual knowledge of the other person, and which then becomes expressed through the physical pleasure union of husband and wife. So that knowledge of yourself as an ish or an isha, that you have an ishiyut, that you have godliness within you, can be expressed fully, husband and wife together, that you're deepening that knowledge of, I want to know this person, I want to know them fully, and I accept them fully as they are, and therefore I have to accept myself as I am as well. And please God, we should all be able to remember that we have our children, Bezrat Hashem. We should all have an easy path of having our children and raising our children. That's a continuous journey. That stops when they leave the house, and then the mitzvah of chinuch kind of stops at that point. But what doesn't stop is the mitzvah of Devic. Al ken yazov ish et aviv et imo v'tavak be'ishto v'hayu levasar echad. That kind of Devic, that kind of cleaving and connection, that bond that is continuously becoming stronger and stronger each time the couple separates and comes back together, and separates and comes back together, and they're deepening their understanding and their love for each other. That Devic becomes Vayula Vasar Echad, which Rashi says they become one in the fetus that, if Hashem wills it to be, comes of that love, of that union that a husband and wife share, where they come to know each other and cleave to each other. That love is expressed in a child, which I think is amazing, because when I got married, I remember thinking, this is the person I'm closest to in the whole world, and yet he's not, we don't share the same blood. He's not my blood relative. So, but I feel closer to him than I do to my mother and father. Like, this is the family I'm starting. And it was really sad for me to think that we actually weren't blood relatives until our Yehuda was born. And in Yehuda, he shares my DNA. He shares Liron's DNA. He is that living proof, that living being of our love for each other. I bless us all that we can keep this at the forefront of our minds. Chinuch is important. Teaching our children is important. Getting it right is important. Getting it wrong is part of the process. But focusing our attention on our relationship between husband and wife, investing in it so that we do love each other, investing in it that we even like each other. Right? Kind of, we always love each other, but to like each other is something else. And we all want to feel that somebody likes us, especially somebody who knows us so well. So I bless us all that we should, please God, merit to create homes full of kedusha, homes full of love, intimacy, closeness, embraces, and knowing of each other and knowing of yourself. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe down below and hit the bell for notifications. You can also catch me on Instagram. If you are new to this channel, please let me know in the comments down below. I would love to say hello to you and welcome you to our community.